Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Fast and Furious, starring Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, Jordana Brewster, John Ortiz, Laz Alonso, Sung Kang, Gal Gadot, Jack Conley, and Shia Wingham, and directed by Justin Lin. Now I remember going to theaters for this, and did I think it was boring? Probably at the time because I couldn't understand what the story was going on. So let me see if that still remains the case for this movie. Let's get into it. In the Dominican Republic, Dominic Toretto, returned by Vin Diesel, Letty, returned by Michelle Rodriguez, along with a couple of guys, and Han, returned by Sung Kang, who died in the last movie. But this is before Tokyo Drift. Keep in mind, going after a truck, with oil, which is worth money, and the trucker sees them robbing him as they go down a hill and grabs one and gets the hell out of there as Dominic grabs Letty and almost gets killed by a truck that's rolling around but makes it out alive, as that was a fun, entertaining moment in the film, as that piece of action was unrealistic, sure, but I was entertained at this scene. Han says to Dom the police tracker found where Dom is at, as he's now a wanted man, and he wants Letty to not be near Dom as Dom leaves her so she can be safe. And I really don't care for the scenes with Dom and Letty for what little Letty does in this movie. Brian O'Connor, returned by Paul Walker, chases a perp in a rather unspectacular chase sequence and gives a name of David Park, and Brian is again a cop, and I thought he didn't want that life anymore. It's confusing what in the hell this guy wants. Dom gets reported that Letty is dead by his sister Mia, returned by Jordana Brewster, as he and Brian attend her funeral, but Dom is in a distance from the cops as Dom goes back to the house and they grew up in and wants to see the location of where Letty was killed and is led to believe she was murdered. And honestly, I don't know why he wants to go to that place where she was murdered, and I don't care, as I don't care for these characters, and that leads to a boring movie. I remember being boring with the movie when I saw it in theaters because it didn't make much sense, and I don't like the quiet talky scenes as they don't entertain me in the movie, but I remember the next one being better as I could follow that film a little better, but I'll get there next time. Dom and Brian are looking for the same guy whom I brought up earlier, David Park, while Mia is visited by Brian, and their chemistry is not great by Paul Walker and Jordana Brewster, as it was much better in the first film than here. And what a convenient coincidence that Brian and Dom are looking for the same person for somewhat different reasons. Brian happens to be at a recruiter of the David Park crew's house, while Dom tries to get information out of out of the suspect, and Dom and Brian takes him in while Dom escapes, and Brian is beating an asshole cop up as he tells Brian he's finished. And that is not his call to make. And Brian goes after David Park as there's a race coming up. Brian takes the case of going after David Park as he gets there and is greeted by Giselle, played by Gal Gadot. Dobb happens to be there and gets more information by Campos, played by John Ortiz, and tells every driver to race to their destination. And this is the point the movie is getting boring, but not as boring as the last film. There's times when this movie is entertaining me, and it's the cars and the action in this movie that are entertaining me the most. Dom pushes Brian to second place in a maneuver that can be messed up. What was hilarious was the guy bullying Brian around, named Dwight, getting FBI on his ass. That was pretty funny. Dom happens to be at a club where Brian is at also, and they talk business with Campos with drinks, and the club scene did feel banal as it is absolutely bland, Brian gets to a signal to go to the next destination where they put a tracking device on his car. They're putting on a truck, taking to Mexico, and they drive to an underground tunnel, and that scene was fun, but it's not enough for me to get out of boredom I have with this movie. Dom brings up Letty to the guy he calls Boss Man because they had an encounter that he thought he was the boss man. Well, not Dom. Well, not thought, but that he called and had a. You get the point. To ask if he killed her. Meanwhile, he turns on the gasoline air and blows up his car as Brian drives himself and Dom away from the bad guys, which did entertain me as this isn't the worst of the bad ones. It's not quite as good as the original, but is so far the best one of the bad ones. They find some drugs in the trunk of the car they take from the attack, and they put it in the last place they expect as Mia arrives at the house they're hiding at to fix up Dom, and joins them for the reasons as Letty and Brian. As Brian tells his reasons on why he let Dom go in the first film. And Dom finds out Letty called Brian, and Dom beats the crap out of him, and Brian explained she did something for Dom, which is to clear his name as Dom can come home, and for a brief fight, it wasn't that bad in my opinion. Dom calls Giselle, and talks with Campos about what he wants, which is to meet him and Brian to a secure location. As Brian tells the cops after they're done with the mission to get Campos, Dom walks out of a free man, which is an interesting but not a great choice for the next movie because, well, we'll get there. Dom and Brian meets up with Campos, and they make a trade for some drugs, the killer's identity, and the FBI comes in and spoils everything as Campos was the only one that killed Letty and almost killed Giselle. But Dom saves her, and the cops are in trouble as Brian refuses to let it go. But the action is sort of good. But the scenes that's quiet and talky are not very great, directed by but Justin Lin will improve next time. Brian goes up to Dom in his place to get him to go after Campos together in Mexico, and Giselle meets them to get the location of Campos. And they go after him as they get him in a church and capture him, and all of his men go after Brian and Dom and shoot their cars down. But Dom and Brian overpower the bad guys, and Brian goes to the tunnel in the rocks as they lead them to America, probably illegally. Brian crashes his car as he flips over, and the boss man gets Campos out of it and beats up Brian and almost kills him, but Dom shows up and squishes him to death, and the cops come in and sends Dom to prison with no parole for 25 years of life by a sentence. Brian and Mia and others get him out, and we lead to the next movie, and the climax was entertaining, but it's unfortunately not enough for me to like this movie. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.8 out of 10. The action is sort of good, but the talky scenes are rather banal, as I can take the action scenes seriously, whereas the dialogue is laughable. There were times it got boring, but I wasn't falling asleep, nor was I checked out of the movie. And there's good things in here, and there's also some bad things in this movie. The characters are not the best thing about the movie, just like the acting, as the plot is boring, but it was entertaining when we get to the action scenes. But unfortunately, it's not enough for me to like this movie, but next time we will improve. So good try to Justin Lin. Next time you'll do better. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Fast 5. And until next time, let's race.